Hello everyone, Gammon here. So, unlike most of my usual why you should watch videos or what you should play, this video will eventually have spoilers in it. But not until the second part of the video, so don't worry about that right now. The reason I can't really talk about musume without going into spoilers is because, well, if I talk about it on a surface level, I have absolutely nothing good to say. I should not enjoy this show as much as I did. Musume is a show about horse girls, because sometimes during ancient Egypt, some pharaoh got way too frisky with the livestock, and now we have horse girls, I guess. Despite being an unholy union of man and beast, horse girls ended up being an integral part of human society. Specifically, they ended up racing each other for the amusement of the superior species, humankind. Also singing and dancing for some reason, don't worry about that. So this show is set in modern day, and our protagonist is Special Week, a horse girl raised out in the country who's just now arriving in the big city, hoping to be just the best gosh darn horse girl in Japan. She gets molested immediately. So, look, like I said, at least in terms of aesthetics, my preferences lean much more to things like megalobox. In fact, I'd say in terms of aesthetics, megalobox is nearly gosh darn perfect. I love the 90s style animation, the darker themes and palettes, and boxing is just such a dynamic sport to animate. On the other hand, Musume is incredibly bright, both in palette and in character design. It has Pretty Derby in its name, for fuck's sakes. And it has the protagonists run around in actual idol costumes. And the running itself should be boring. It really should. It's literally just a bunch of CG models running down a track. Musume is also kinda just a commercial for a fucking horse racing gacha game. On an aesthetics level, I can tolerate this show because, well, I've developed a very high weeb tolerance. But it doesn't really do much for me. And yet, in some kind of miraculous, fortuitous event, I love Musume more than Megalobox. Significantly more. And the best I can do to explain why without going into spoilers is that Joe felt invulnerable, impregnable, flat. This made boxing matches that should have been heart-pounding incredibly dull, as I had no doubt who'd come out on top. On the other hand, Musume is filled with very vulnerable and relatable characters who you can't help but worry for. And the reason for this difference is Musume does tragedy incredibly well. Yes, it has all the frills and the fluff of an idol show, and yet at its heart, it's actually a really good sports anime. And that comes with everything that implies. Camaraderie, rivalry, incredible unexpected wins, and the heartbreaking losses. But it's that last bit, it's the losses, that Musume nails. And odds are the reason for that is how realistic they decided to make the show. And no, I'm not talking about the horse ears being functional and the telephones being elongated to accommodate for them, though I'm going to admit that was a nice and unexpected touch. What I'm talking about is that each horse girl is based off an actual horse, and the results of each race roughly correlate to the results that horse had in real life. Though obviously sometimes they went ahead and, fudged the results for dramatic effect. And since horses and people lose all the time in real life, so will our protagonists. And these are the things we'll be talking about for the rest of this video. How Musume did tragedy so incredibly well. So yeah, from this point on, there's going to be spoilers. Spoiler warning, you've been warned. Let's start at the beginning and talk about the first part of the show. This will be episodes 1 through 5. So, as I mentioned before, the story is focused on Special Week and her promise to become Japan's best horse girl. When she first shares this dream, everyone laughs at her, and to make things worse, she loses the race to get into the team she wanted to join. But things quickly pick up for her as she joins the same team as her idol, and we learn about the Triple Crown, a title given to a horse girl that wins 3 races. Winning these 3 races ends up being the first important goal on her journey to becoming the best horse girl in Japan, and she even wins the preliminary race. Everything seems to be going well for her, and it's even stated that the horse that wins the preliminary race will usually win the real race, which is why her loss to someone she beat in the preliminary race comes as such a shock. The loss is at the heart of this 5-episode arc, and what drives it forward. The first thing that happens after the loss, of course, is her processing it with her trainer, because you can't learn and move on from a tragedy before emotionally processing it first. As I mentioned in my previous video, processing tragedy is a really important step in writing it well. The next 2 episodes focus on attempting to fix the reason for her failure, either through diet and exercise or learning new techniques to run up hills. I'll be honest, I went into this show with very low expectations, and the overall aesthetics of it made me think I wouldn't like it. But I loved the first 5-episode arc and how well it utilized tragedy to the point where Special Week's loss actually ends up being at the heart of the arc as well as its driving force. The first 2 episodes are used to build up your expectations, building up the title of Triple Crown in your mind, setting it up as a goal, and then showing you that this goal is achievable. Looking at just these 2.5 episodes, you can chart out a course in your mind about where this show is going. You can end up thinking that this show is going to be all about Special Week's rise to the top as she wins race after race and ends up winning the Triple Crown, which again is kind of what I expected out of the show because of its bright aesthetics. The show led me to expect a rags to riches story. But then tragedy occurred and the trajectory of the story changed dramatically. At the halfway point of episode 3, after her loss, after her defeat, after she's been brought low, her previous tragedy ends up driving her future actions. She isn't just running hills out of a general desire to get stronger. She's doing it specifically because failing to run up a hill caused her loss. She's not just dieting out of a general desire to get faster. She's doing it because she couldn't fit into her uniform and that contributed to her past loss. And despite her eventually winning in the Derby, the past tragedy isn't erased. She can't be a Triple Crown, not this year at least, because she failed in the first of the 3 races. Because while the protagonist can and should use tragedy as a form of growth and character development, there should always be some form of permanent damage or change. Special Week can't win the Triple Crown this year. Midoriya's hand will always be bent. Rock Lee will never walk again. Fuck Naruto. Anyway, after the arc finishes with her win in the Derby against the person who defeated her previously, and her becoming a better, more experienced racer, Episode 6 is mostly just fluff and is there to serve as a palate cleanser before your next arc. The next arc is going to be spanning episodes 7 through 9, in which a different form of tragedy happens. Our protagonist, Zero, Silent Suzuka, suffers what seems to be a career-ending injury. Unlike the first tragedy, there's no real fault here. Nobody is to blame, nothing really happened. Sometimes, no matter how good you are or how well prepared you are, something happens and bones break, a muscle tears, a tendon snaps. It sucks, but it happens, and there really isn't much you can do about it. So, unlike the first arc, which focused on fixing mistakes and growing stronger from a tragedy, this one is focusing on adapting to the tragedy and incorporating it into who you are, because, well, some things you can't really control for, and you can't really fix. Essentially, the entirety of the next 2 episodes are all about processing the tragedy, not learning or growing from it. In these episodes, Suzuka slowly fights the fear the injury caused, which prevents her from running at full speed, eventually managing to get past her fear and allowing herself to run again. This time though, while she's aware of the risk, she's not going to let it hold her back. She's grown as a person. She's no longer naive. She now knows how badly things can go. She's incorporated that knowledge into her though, and she won't let it stop her from trying to achieve her dreams. Special Week, on the other hand, learns how to not hold herself back for others. She also, in a way, incorporated that other people can have horrible things happen to them, that she cannot control that, and that she has to sometimes focus on herself. Now, I can do the same sort of analysis for the third part, which is defined by the tragedy of El Paso, but it's kind of getting long here, and I think it's about time I wrap this video up. So, let me just do a quick summary. Uma Musume to me is a very strong example of how to use tragedy well. In each of its three parts, tragedy plays a major role in moving its story forward, and it has a powerful presence in each of the episodes. So hopefully I'm not being repetitive here, but each part follows a very simple but incredibly effective path of utilizing tragedy. You set up for it, so it will take the audience by surprise, you process it, you allow it to influence your protagonist's future actions, and you allow the protagonist to vanquish it without minimizing or erasing it. That's why I liked this show as much as I did. It really manages to capture the pain of defeat as well as the joy of victory. It made the races, despite being visually boring, exciting and tense, and really made me sympathize with the characters on screen. It's also why I think you should watch the show, and hopefully why you'll like it. Anyway, that should be enough for now. I hope you enjoyed this show, and I hope you liked this video. And please remember, I am not a weeb.